ourselves similar to knowing like a concept of science, like a stationary set of rules, instructions, or laws that we have to learn and understand intellectually, and we are done. Like there was some information that was presented to us, and we have learned and understood how it works. We have to an extent even memorized the concept, and that was it. And similarly, as we know the concepts in science or even events of histories or the concepts of a language, similarly we understand about ourselves. We understand how we behave, we identify the patterns in which we function, we see the way we talk to some people, and we see a different way we talk to other set of people, and what we think during the day or what we think during the night, or what are the thoughts that goes in our head while we are talking to someone. These are the things that we have to know about ourselves, our thinking, our patterns, the set of behavior, and that is it. We have known ourselves. Is this what we call knowing ourselves? To just familiarize oneself with one's own idiosyncrasies, one's own little particular thought patterns and feelings, or there is more to it? Is knowing oneself a stationary practice, like there are set laws of a language, or there are set concepts in physics or chemistry? Is it the same when it comes to knowing ourselves psychologically, how we function? Are there some set rules, patterns that we have to learn and then we are done? Is that so? Is this the process through which we know ourselves? Does somebody else tell us who we are? Is it written somewhere in a book which we learn and memorize, and then we declare that we have known ourselves? Or it is a continuous thing from moment to moment, every hour of the day? Does one learn about themselves? One learns about themselves when they are idle, and one learns about themselves when they are busy, occupied with the work. One learns about themselves when they are alone, and one learns about themselves when they are engaging with the other. Isn't that supposed to be a more thorough, organic way to learn ourselves, rather than some through set laws or concepts through which we see and assess ourselves against them? Our behavior, our thoughts, our feelings are constantly changing. There would be some actions in one situation at one point of time, and then we would behave in a completely different way when we are at that same place but at a different point of time. Our thoughts, our feelings, how the mind works is always different, continuous. It is always moving, changing. We would have some certain ideas about who we are a few years ago, but then when we think of who we are and how we understand the life that we live is quite different now from our past. What is changing constantly and is always new and fresh cannot be understood through old, stale and past ways. If this is life and it is constantly moving, continuously changing, and this is us looking at this flux which is never the same, we are bound to be misinterpreting, misunderstanding what this flux is. So we this thing being always fresh and new, we ought to be always be approaching it with a new set of eyes, with a fresher mind. And can the mind be really fresh if it is already burdened with fixed stationary beliefs and notions about what this ever changing flux is supposed to be? Can we really have one philosophy of life and through that philosophy approach this ever changing, moving, living thing which is life? And if we are not fresh in our approach to life, then there is bound to be some mismatch, a dissonance between the movement of life and then the ideals that we have about it. There would naturally be conflict and contradiction, and that is what most of us face in our lives. Certain fixed ideals that we have about what life is supposed to be, and through these fixed ideals we come to life begging for security, asking for love, asking for some warmth, and then most of the time we find ourselves stranded, we find ourselves alone, not loving, not warm, not kind within, and completely insecure within ourselves. Because having a fixed idea about what life is, we demand from that fixed idea a security. Our demand for security is from limited things. There is this movement of life which has love, security, passion to offer, and then the things in which we find love, security and passion are limited and fixed things. They are stationary things. So the offer of life, of this love, security and passion goes over our head because we are too occupied and busy in finding security in limited things, in things that are narrow. We find security in a house, in people, in objects, in certain ideas and beliefs that are again fixed. And without understanding this ever fresh, ever new movement of life, we cling on to these limited things. Not that one should devoid themselves of basic requirements of life that is given, but see the demand and dependency and inward dependency on these things, asking a certain security in them. We find ourselves stuck in the limited options that we have gathered for ourselves, in the limited things that we think would give the everlasting security. How can they give that everlasting security? Because they are in themselves limited, they are in themselves very small, they are in themselves circumscribed by their own boundaries. And our demand is of an immeasurable space, our demand is of everlasting love, our demand is for complete security. And the things that in themselves are liable to perish, susceptible to time, can give us that timeless quality of life. They are in themselves bounded by time. They are here today, the people, the house, the ideas, the beliefs, they are here now and they won't be here tomorrow. They are just here for a brief moment in time, and within these brief moment of time we struggle or yearn for a timeless thing, a timeless quality through which we can live our lives. But when the things that we reach out to are in time, how are we expecting them to give us or to even get us close to the thing that is timeless? So when we learn about ourselves through our relationships, through our interactions and engagement with other people, and through our day-to-day behavior, we are easily able to spot the narrowness, at times pettiness, or the insecurity that oozes out in certain situations, or the fear that we avoid at any cost. When we do find ourselves being besieged, being surrounded by all of these evils, so to say, we think that this would be it, that it would crystallize, that these discoveries that we have made about ourselves would crystallize and be the final point in our identity, of our identity, be the final face of who we are, that we will just remain petty, we would just remain narrow, we would remain in fear, insecure. But is that so? What we are then alluding to is that upon being faced, upon being coming in contact with our own narrowness, pettiness, there is no possibility of a complete shift in the mind, a complete radical change in the mind. We think that upon finding who we really are, we would just be that, and if life, which is in itself dynamic, changing, upon finding, the one who is living this life finds his own narrowness and pettiness and is facing it directly, how are we so sure that it, seeing its own insecurity, seeing its own fear and how they come about, would not completely change, would not completely mutate from what it was to something we don't know what it will be? How are we so sure within ourselves that upon finding our own shallowness, that we will continue to be shallow? And isn't this just plain logic, that to go beyond something is to go through it? To not be shallow is to come in contact with your superficiality and then understand how does it come about, and in understanding that you cross it and yes, go beyond it, without even acknowledging, without coming in contact with your own superficiality, your own insecurities, your own pettiness, narrowness. How do we think that we are going to go beyond it? Or we have consciously chosen to be that and think that not acting petty outwardly and not acting insecure outwardly would rid us of our own insecurities, would rid us of our own narrowness. Does that how we think things work psychologically? When we find ourselves coming up with logic, with arguments about why we won't be able to change, why we won't be ever secure, why there won't be ever actual love in our lives, we tend to give all these arguments from a place of insecurity, from a place of narrowness. And so all those facts that are against cutting down our own narrowness, that are against coming out of our own shallow, miserable state, have to be innately flawed, because the narrow mind is giving logic for itself to be narrow. All of this logic is the trick of that small mind, that it plays on itself to remain the way as it is, to sustain itself, to continue the way it is being going on. And we think that they really make sense, and then we end up believing them, that all of these arguments against not being free, or against my insecurity, or against my smallness, they do really make sense, and we end up believing them, when inherently it is the pettiness within that has come up with a reason to remain petty, and we, being petty ourselves, are absolutely convinced by the logic that it has given to us and then we end up being and continue to live an insecure life, an unloved life. What we call love is just a attraction, or it's just an attachment, which is never love in the first place. We continue in that same way. We keep on with our own shallowness, we keep on with our own fears and superficiality, because we have postponed change, because we think change is not really for us, because all of our qualities have given us arguments and presented us with proper logic, and we think that they are really rational, proper logic against not against living a fearless life, against living a complete life, against living a deeper, meaningful life. And we are absolutely convinced that, you know, this is the only way that I would find security, and this is the only way that I would ever find some depth, if I were to find it. And then we never really change, because we have all of these ideas about change that are given to us by the entity that is within us, who doesn't want us to change. We are always caught up in these games that the mind plays on itself, and not knowing these games, these tricks that the mind plays upon itself, we become its victim, we become its prey. Our mind is the predator, and within us, who wants to be free, who wants actual real love in their life, who wants this everlasting sense of security, not sense, the real security, who wants an immeasurable space within, is completely neglected. We never really discover the possibility of a different life altogether, of what real goodness really is. And in a sense, the predator preys upon itself and ends up being its own prey. The abuser becomes the abused. The trickster tricks itself.